Episode 35. He enjoys acid pops, said Ron, who had read the message over Harry's shoulder and was looking perplexed. It's the password to get past the gargoyle outside his study, said Harry in a low voice. Ha! Snape's not going to be pleased. I won't be able to do his detention. He, Ron, and Hermione spent the whole of break speculating on what Dumbledore would teach Harry. Ron thought it most likely to be spectacular jinxes and hexes of the type the Death Eaters would not know. Hermione said such things were illegal and thought it much more likely that Dumbledore wanted to teach Harry advanced defensive magic. After break, she went off to arithmancy while Harry and Ron returned to the common room, where they grudgingly started Snape's homework. This turned out to be so complex that they still had not finished when Hermione joined them for their after-lunch free period, though she considerably speeded up the process. They had only just finished when the bell rang for the afternoon's double potions, and they beat the familiar path down to the dungeon classroom that had for so long been Snape's. When they arrived in the corridor, they saw that there were only a dozen people progressing to Newt level. Crabbe and Goyle had evidently failed to achieve the required owl grade, but 4 Slytherins had made it through, including Malfoy. 4 Ravenclaws were there, and 1 Hufflepuff, Ernie Macmillan, whom Harry liked despite his rather pompous manner. "Harry," Ernie said portentously, holding out his hand as Harry approached. "Didn't get a chance to speak in defense against the dark arts this morning. Good lesson, I thought, but shield charms are old hat, of course, for us old DA lags. And how are you, Ron? Hermione?" Before they could say more than "fine," the dungeon door opened and Slughorn's belly preceded him out of the door. As they filed into the room, his great walrus mustache curved above his beaming mouth, and he greeted Harry and Zabini with particular enthusiasm. The dungeon was most unusually already full of vapors and odd smells. Harry, Ron, and Hermione sniffed interestedly as they passed large, bubbling cauldrons. The 4 Slytherins took a table together, as did the 4 Ravenclaws. This left Harry, Ron, and Hermione to share a table with Ernie. They chose the one nearest a gold-colored cauldron that was emitting one of the most seductive scents Harry had ever inhaled. Somehow, it reminded him simultaneously of treacle tart, the woody smell of a broomstick handle, and something flowery he thought he might have smelled at the Burrow. He found that he was breathing very slowly and deeply, and that the potion's fumes seemed to be filling him up like drink. A great contentment stole over him. He grinned across at Ron, who grinned back lazily. "Now then, said Slughorn, whose massive outline was quivering through the many shimmering vapors. "Scales out, everyone, and potion kits, and don't forget your copies of Advanced Potion Making." "Sir," said Harry, raising his hand. "Harry, my boy." "I haven't got a book or scales or anything, nor's Ron. We didn't realize we'd be able to do the newt, you see." "Ah, yes, Professor McGonagall did mention. Not to worry, my dear boy, not to worry at all. You can use ingredients from the store cupboards today, and I'm sure we can lend you some scales. And we've got a small stock of old books here that they'll do until you can write to flourish and blots." Slughorn strode over to a corner cupboard and, after a moment's foraging, emerged with 2 very battered-looking copies of Advanced Potion Making by Libatus Borage, which he gave to Harry and Ron along with 2 sets of tarnished scales. "Now then," said Slughorn, returning to the front of the class and inflating his already bulging chest so that the buttons on his waistcoat threatened to burst off. "I've prepared a few potions for you to have a look at, just out of interest, you know. These are the kind of things you ought to be able to make after completing your newts. You ought to have heard of 'em, even if you haven't made 'em yet. Anyone tell me what this one is?" He indicated the cauldron nearest the Slytherin table. Harry raised himself slightly in his seat and saw what looked like plain water boiling away inside it. Hermione's well-practiced hand hit the air before anybody else's. Slughorn pointed at her.
"It's Veritaserum, a colorless, odorless potion that forces the drinker to tell the truth," said Hermione.
Very good, said Slughorn happily. "Now," he continued, pointing at the cauldron nearest the Ravenclaw table, "this one here is pretty well known. Featured in a few ministry leaflets lately, too. Who can—" Hermione's hand was the fastest once more.
"It's Polyjuice Potion, sir," she said.
Harry, too, had recognized the slow-bubbling, mud-like substance in the second cauldron, but did not resent Hermione getting the credit for answering the question. She, after all, was the one who had succeeded in making it back in their second year. "Excellent! Now, this one here—" "Yes, my dear," said Slughorn, now looking slightly bemused, as Hermione's hand punched the air again.
"It's Amortentia."
"It is indeed. It seems almost foolish to ask," said Slughorn, who was looking mightily impressed, "but I assume you know what it does."
"It's the most powerful love potion in the world," said Hermione. "And the steam rising in characteristic spirals," said Hermione enthusiastically. "And it's supposed to smell differently to each of us according to what attracts us. And I can smell freshly mown grass and new parchment and—" But she turned slightly pink and did not complete the sentence. "May I ask your name, my dear?" said Slughorn, ignoring Hermione's embarrassment. "Hermione Granger, sir."
Granger. Can you possibly be related to Hector Dagworth Granger, who founded the most extraordinary society of potioneers?"
"No, I don't think so, sir. I'm Muggle-born, you see."
Harry saw Malfoy lean close to Nott and whisper something. Both of them snickered, but Slughorn showed no dismay. On the contrary, he beamed and looked from Hermione to Harry, who was sitting next to her. "Oh, one of my best friends is Muggle-born, and she's the best in our year. I'm assuming this is the very friend of whom you spoke, Harry?" "Yes, sir," said Harry. Well, take 20 well-earned points for Gryffindor, Miss Granger," said Slughorn genially. Malfoy looked rather as he had done the time Hermione had punched him in the face. Hermione turned to Harry with a radiant expression and whispered,
"Did you really tell him I'm the best in the year? Oh, Harry!"
What's so impressive about that?" whispered Ron, who for some reason looked annoyed. "You are the best in the year. I'd have told him so if he'd asked me." Hermione smiled, but made a shh gesture, so that they could hear what Slughorn was saying. Ron looked slightly disgruntled. "Amortentia doesn't really create love, of course. It is impossible to manufacture or imitate love. No, this will simply cause a powerful infatuation or obsession. It is probably the most dangerous and powerful potion in this room." "Oh, yes," he said, nodding gravely at Malfoy and Nott, both of whom were smirking skeptically. "When you have seen as much of life as I have, you will not underestimate the power of obsessive love." "And now," said Slughorn, "it is time for us to start work." "Sir, you haven't told us what's in this one," said Ernie Macmillan, pointing at a small black cauldron standing on Slughorn's desk. The potion within was splashing about merrily. It was the color of molten gold, and large drops were leaping like goldfish above the surface, though not a particle had spilled. "Oh!" said Slughorn again. Harry was sure that Slughorn had not forgotten the potion at all, but had waited to be asked for dramatic effect. "Yes, that. Well, that one, ladies and gentlemen, is a most curious little potion called Felix Felicis. I take it," he turned, smiling to look at Hermione, who had let out an audible gasp, "that you know what Felix Felicis does, Miss Granger?"